I know that you've been very public about advising retired officers to stay out of politics. Again, we're just talking about what your advice is to future naval officers. Do you ever, or are you ever asked about the politics piece when you're in those forums? You say they're going to be okay. Are we going to be okay going forward here?
Well, I'm hugely concerned about the future of our democracy because of what's happened in the last several years. The political division has just taken on an acceleration to the extremes, and I think that's potentially devastating to the future of our country. The military needs to stay out of it. In fact, this goes back to Vietnam, where the military was blamed for the wars. And we built ourselves back up. And when I'm asked about the bin Laden kill, my response is generally that was the result of an effort. Yes, it was special forces, but our military has grown to be exceptional in its professionalism and in its execution. And so that event actually highlighted for me the rebuild over decades from Vietnam, getting out of the hole that we were in back then, and I don't want to lose that. In recent polls or recent surveys, you've seen the trust on the part of the American people with respect to the military, with the institution, has gone down. It's still very high, but we're no longer at the top, and I think that's partly a result of the political division that's here and the politicization of the military in these very difficult and challenging times, political times for sure. There's a lot at stake here for us as a military and for us as a country. I've said for years, you and I have visited countries where the military was completely politicized, and we would never want to live in any of those countries. This is the country I want to live in. And so we need to be very careful about that. And my position on that is those who are former military, in particular former military officers, should virtually act like they were still wearing the uniform on active duty, because we don't talk about political issues or policy that we disagree with publicly when we're in active duty. But I'd carry it to even in the private domain after we retire. Doesn't mean you don't have the right to do it, but I think it damages the institution that you care so much about, the United States military, with the exception of those who decide to have a political career. So I would encourage veterans, those who've served, to get into politics because we need good people to do that. And my own view is we have fewer and fewer high-quality people in that arena over time, and we've got some great Iraq, Afghanistan vets who have become literally mostly representatives in the House, but oftentimes that'll parlay itself into being a senator. I think that's absolutely critical for the future of the country and for our military. That said, if you're not a politician, my strong belief is and recommendation is stay out of politics publicly, because the American people, when they see you interviewed, that you're Commander, Ward Carroll, and you're an expert almost by definition, whether you're active duty or retired, and so there are too many quote unquote experts on both sides of the aisle, on cable in particular, that get interviewed as experts, and many of them are getting paid, which is that much more significant from my point of view, to criticize the institution, the policy that the institution they care about has to carry out, and that they carried out when they were on active duty. I think that damages us as an institution in the military, and it does great damage to the country. So I've encouraged people for a long time, to stay out of politics. Flynn and Allen got away, but believe me, I am critical of both of them. They both know that. And, for whatever reason, they decided to do it. They're not the only ones, but, they certainly are the leading examples. And yet there were previous presidential conventions in both parties where you'd line up a half a dozen retired military flags, on the podium to make speeches. We talked about John Nathman, who I got a lot of time for. Nathman has been on the stage of a couple conventions himself, again, on both sides. What I don't have is the data that anything like that ever converts to helping someone win a nomination or an election, quite frankly. So we really have to, I believe we really have to be careful with that. There were, I don't know, a dozen of us or so last year that essentially published this letter on principles for civilian-military relationships. I didn't really understand, Mooch, how challenging and difficult and complex those are when I was executing them, particularly in the chairman's role, which I did for 4 years there. I taught for 6 years up at Princeton, and we focused on Civ Mil. I included in the discussion with the young future officers here at the Naval Academy. It's enormously complex. In fact, next week, or I take it back, in fact, tomorrow, a significant part of the class is about Civ Mil. It's a real delicate balance. And the politicals, many of them, will only stop at the limits you create. And we need to say, that's not okay. I'm not talking about that. I'm not going to do that. So as we speak right now, we're in the middle of this drill with Senator Tuberville, holding up confirmations of over 300 flag officers. And if it continues, the estimate is that will be closer to 600 or plus by the end of the year, calendar year, and it's somewhere of 80% of our flag community. It's an incredible disruption to our military, to our readiness, to our families, to spouses that are trying to get jobs or relocate, to kids getting into school, personal expenses that you have to pay. And it's a disservice to those who sacrificed so much, many of whom fought in these wars that we were just talking about. Senator Tuberville, any senator, any politician, have the debate about the political issue of abortion. I don't have a problem with that. Just don't, on the one hand, say the worst thing we can have is a military that's politicized, which Tuberville has written in an op-ed, while he politicizes our military. Hypocrisy is not new in Washington, D.C., but it's very visible, and it really is hurting us right now. What we need to do, in my view, in current times on these issues involving, the social issues in particular. This is diversity, equity, inclusion. It's race. It's CRT. It's whatever woke is, and I haven't really figured that out. What the politicians need to do, in my view, is the Democrats need to take a position where, as they advocate for many of these issues, that the civilian leaders, the political appointees, become the advocates, that they don't ask those in uniform to publicly come out and support them. And what the Republicans need to do is not continue to focus on damaging our military, attacking our military leaders. We need to kind of have a ceasefire on all that. And the political leaders on both sides need to lead us forward and keep us out of it. It is the quintessential, very timely example right now of what's going on in terms of damaging our military, whether it's Tuberville specifically on this flag issue, or those who would put us out in front and speak for them on the Democratic side, which is very challenging, and those that would attack us because we're supporting them on these issues from the Republican side. And the country's going to pay a big price for this.
Well, you and I know we hosted many congressional junkets when you were the bat crew, and generally I would be hosting these professional staffers, the other folks that would come on kind of with this cynical point of view. We'd put the cranial and the float coat on them, let them stand by the foul line and launch a Tomcat, and they were believers. I think that would do a lot of those lawmakers
And a
good.
Hornet.
And sure, we had some Hornets, yeah. It just wasn't quite as impressive as an F-14B on Cat 3. You can see the rest of this episode by clicking on the link in the description below. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel as well as my main channel so you don't miss anything going forward. Thanks.